I am Sunita, and I am the verbal head at GMAT Quiz. Um, I have been in this prep industry for almost a decade now, and in my experience, it is my experience in these last 10 years which has helped me connect very well with students. Okay, so even though it's like blowing your own trumpet, but then since there's nobody else here, so I've got to blow that trumpet here. I would say one of the best things that I do is I connect very well with my students. Each student has his or her own difficult areas, right? Everybody is not facing the same difficulty. Everybody is not making the same mistakes. So one of the best things that I do is I understand what the student is faltering and where the student is faltering. And according to that, I cater to the student. And keeping those points in mind, we have developed the entire verbal course at GMAT Quiz. So very quickly, I'll tell you just in 3 slides, guys, just hold on to that, about GMAT Quiz. Some of you might be knowing about us. Some of you might not be knowing about us. So let me tell you a very little of your time, just about 3 minutes. So GMAT Quiz is world's only truly personalized course. When we say truly personalized, what does it mean? What does it mean to you? So see, most of these online courses, what they do is you just have the course. It's a passive learning kind of thing. But what happens at our end is when you join our online course, what you get is not just AI-driven intervention. Okay, the course keeps telling you at various stages what you are doing, how you are progressing, whether you are progressing or not. If you are not progressing, what are you supposed to do? All right. Usually online courses are courses where you just keep on clicking the next button to see what is coming up next, and that's it. But in our courses at various junctures, we have this AI driven technique which will kind of keep directing you to the mistakes that you're making you move back to the concepts that you need to revise, and then again testing you on that concept before you move forward. Because once you've made a mistake and not realized it at that point of time, later on you're just going to keep on making the same mistake, and it would be too late after you have finished the course. So so specifically speaking, in what way is it personalized? Okay, there are 3 levels at which the course is really personalized. All right, so I'm just going to quickly tell you about that. Just give me a moment. Yeah, so we have this very personalized study plan. Usually the study plans that you get are static study plans. They do not adapt according to your progress. Okay, you might have made a plan at the beginning of your course, and then you might have not been able to keep up with the pace, or you might have actually gone faster than you intended to. So usually the study plans that most prep industries, prep institutes give you are static plans. We provide you with a personalized study plan, catering to the kind of time that you can put in, your target score, your exam date. And this plan is not a static one, it keeps changing. So if you are going at a faster pace, you're covering more ground, then the study plan is accelerated on its own. The AI driven platform accelerates the plan. And similarly, if you're going slow, if you're making too many mistakes, the plan adjusts accordingly and tells you what score you're going to reach. When we talk about real-time improvement modules, we're talking about specifically, just what I was telling you a while back. The platform tells you what mistakes you're making and how you have got to improve on those mistakes, which basically makes the course very, very effective. And of course, we have dedicated mentors. One of them is myself. We keep tracking the performances of our students, and we keep telling them what to do and what not to do at various junctures. You can always connect with me and Piyush. Okay, so, and all of this put together gives you the most effective score improvement. I mean, this data that I'm going to present you with is slightly old data, but you can see this is verified GMAT Club data. And we are the only course which has provided 116 improvement points. In fact, that's 121 points by now. All right. So you can see the kind of, it's not just that the code, I'm talking about the course. You've got real-time improvement here. I mean, in my recent time experiences, I have had students whom I have been able to help move from a 520 to a 760. I know that sounds like unreal, but it is very much real. Okay, and it was possible because of the kind of course that we have developed here. So enough about the course. Let's get to the crux of the matter. So guys, let me ask all of you, what is it about critical reasoning which pains you the most? Hi, Alvin. Alvin is from Perth. Ramakrishna is from Bangalore. Sonal is from Lucknow. Hi, Bert. So wonderful having all of you here. Um, yes, so I'll give you that 30 seconds to answer. What is it about critical reasoning which bothers you most, if you are bothered about critical reasoning? Because various students have various problems with different kinds of questions, but in general there would be some things which really a student finds difficult. So Himani says everything about CR troubles me. So Himani, today we are going to tackle some of your troubles, definitely, I promise you that. Quickly, let's see. So Himani, thank you for sharing that. Others, come on guys, let's hear from you. What is it that critical reasoning, why is critical reasoning difficult? So Sanya says she finds it difficult to draw inferences. Well, yes, drawing inference is a very, very, very important skill, guys, not just for critical reasoning, but even for RCs. And today we're going to talk about that as well. Alexandra says, most of the time I'm left with two answers and struggle to find the good one. Well, Alexandra, it's not the good answer, but it's the correct answer. So I do understand. And this is, again, one of the biggest pain points. But do you know why this happens, Alexandra? Do you know why this happens? Why is it that you struggle between two choices? It's not because the choices are close. We think that the choices are close, and that is why we are struggling. It's not that. We are struggling because okay, I'm going to talk about that later, why we struggle at the choices. Atharva is saying he finds it difficult to understand how arguments are connected. So Atharva, we are also going to talk about how to read the stimulus in such a manner that you're able to understand the argument very well. Yash says time management is one point which makes, it difficult for him. He takes more than 2 to 3 minutes. Well, Yash, on average, a CR question should take you about 2 minutes. There's nothing wrong with that. Please do not set a unrealistic target for yourselves. People who say that they should be able to solve a CR question in about a minute or a minute and 15 seconds, guys, don't do that. You might get lucky and get the question correct, but that is not how it's supposed to work. Okay, a very easy CR question would at best take you about 1.5 minutes, and a medium level question would take you about 2 minutes and maybe 10 seconds, and a hard question at least would take you about 2.5 minutes. And this is coming from an expert, guys. Okay, on average, therefore, about 2 minutes per CR question. So let's see. Hi, Fahad. He's picking up the wrong answer choice between last two options. So Fahad and we were talking about Alexandra. We are going to talk about what to do when we are stuck with two close choices. So just hold on to that thought. So Ramakrishna says trap answers trouble him a lot. Yes. So that's, again, the trap is not always in the answer, Rama, The traps are already laid if you're not reading the stimulus properly. That's where the problems begin. Bert says he's stuck between two answers. So Bert, you will also hopefully get a lot of right thrown on that. Amit says it's the assumption. Okay. Yes. So apart from inference, assumption is a very, very important skill. Lots of questions based on assumptions. Alvin says last two answers he marks always a wrong one. Okay. Yes. So that's a common factor. Govindam is deciding between two filtered options. Federico is identifying the conclusion. Very good that you mentioned that, Federico, because today we're going to talk about, if we don't identify the conclusion correctly, often either we are getting the conclusion wrong or we are marking some other choice as the conclusion, and we're trying to identify the assumption behind that conclusion. Fahad finds boldface consuming. So Fahad, I hope you will be there with us for our boldface webinar a few weeks down the line. Flaws, trouble, Avijek, assumption versus strengthener. Shreya says unable to follow a strategy that I make during the practice. That's interesting that you are unable to follow the strategy. So from what I get to understand is all of you are facing problems with assumption. So Amit says assumption is a pain area. Amit says assumption is a pain area. Then Mari Lees is saying evaluation. Dipansh is evaluation. Anshum, right. Conclusion is the key. So, and Navisha says she finds it difficult to differentiate between assumptions and surrender. Now, all these choices that you're telling me, a lot of these choices are somehow connected to pre-thinking, guys. Okay. I'm sure. Okay. How many of y'all are familiar with the term pre-thinking? And I'll tell you in a moment why I'm starting there. So let me just put up a quick poll. How many of y'all are familiar with the concept of pre-thinking? So there's the poll. Let me know how many of y'all are familiar with the word pre-thinking. Good, great. All right. So having got that answer, almost all of you are familiar with the word pre-thinking. I can see some of you are not. So we're going to talk about that. The word pre and thinking, join the two things together, and what do you think it means? Because a lot of, whenever you talk about critical reasoning, one of the things that will keep coming up even in GMAT club and otherwise also is that you should pre-think before you look at the answer choice. So pre-thinking is the thinking that happens between you reading the stimulus and you eliminating the answer choices. So about nearly 60% plus of the class knows about pre-thinking, the others don't. So don't worry, we're going to talk about all the aspects of critical reasoning. But primarily, a lot of my students, a lot of things that you were also telling today that you find assumptions difficult is because of pre-thinking not working. So what is this pre-thinking? It's a very, very important term in critical reasoning. A lot of the students think that pre-thinking is like predicting the answer beforehand, but that is not the point. It's a wrong way of thinking about what pre-thinking really is. So pre-thinking is basically coming up with a shadow answer even before you look at the answer choice. All right. You are supposed to read the stimulus and, so pre-thinking does not happen in terms of predicting the answer choice, but it begins when you're reading the stimulus. So when you are reading and analyzing the stimulus, at that stage itself, your brain starts to process the information that you're reading in front of you. And it starts to connect data only if you allow the brain enough time to do it. So for you to be able to come up with a possible answer, a shadow answer, even before you go to the answer choice, you must read the stimulus carefully, because it is then that your pre-thinking starts. So you read the stimulus, and then you notice some gaps in the stimulus, some pieces of missing information which is not given there, which should be given there for the proper conclusion to be drawn. You notice the gaps, and then at that point of time you come up with possible scenarios that can fill that gap, and that is what pre-thinking really is. Now, a lot of you, how many of y'all are able to pre-think successfully? Let me ask you. For those of you who do know what is pre-thinking, how many of y'all are able to pre-think pretty regularly? Okay, a lot of you are able to pre-think, I can see, but I can see there's going to be movement on the polls. Okay, so I can see it's about a 40-50 kind of thing. Nearly 40% of you say that you are able to pre-think, and more than 60% of you believe pre-thinking is not happening all the time. All right, guys, pre-thinking, as I've already told you guys, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically reading the stimulus and trying to come up with a possible answer, even before you've seen the answer choices. So Fahad says he can think pretty well, wonderful. And then Fahad is also saying only if I don't end up adding outside information. Yes, Fahad, that's something that all of us have the tendency to do. So we cannot avoid it. You cannot unlearn that you already know. Harsh says he's not able to pre-think for every question. And in today's class, we will also talk, guys, if you cannot pre-think, what to do. You don't have to pre-think. Please understand. In fact, personally speaking, if I am trying to solve a question in an exam atmosphere, I usually pre-think only if during the stimulus itself, I have kind of come up with a thought. Otherwise, I just move to the answer choice elimination stage. Ellie says she tries every time. Good for you, Ellie. Today, we'll show you how you can try even harder. Dheeraj says sometimes it depends on the time he has remaining in the section. Well, I guess that's a wise thing to do. But Dheeraj, time or not, there is one thing that you must do. So guys, let me ask you the next question. Okay, before that, let's also discuss very, very quickly why this is happening. So clearly here, this is what pre-thinking is, as in coming up with a possible answer even before looking at the answer choice. Now, a lot of students falter at the pre-thinking, and just now we have seen, let me post the results if I haven't. So if you see the results out there, the poll results, you can see that 50% of the students falter at pre-thinking and just 50% are able to do it, but again, not all the time. Shreya says, for a really long statement, I feel that by the time I finish reading, I'm lagging behind. So cannot follow pre-thinking and all the other steps. Shreya, good that you mentioned that, guys. So I'm sure all of you would be finding it really difficult to keep up with a 40-word long sentence. In fact, in our course, we first teach you how to draw the intended meaning of a single sentence in the SC course. Then from there, we graduate to the CR course, where we tell you how to join the meanings of two or more statements. And from there, we move to the RC course. So there's a reason why we take up the SC course first. Anyway, so more of that later. Why do students falter at pre-thinking? Why are you not able to pre-think? Okay, very, very simple, guys, and it's very simple. You do not have a clear understanding of the stimulus. Just now, Shreyas was telling us that he finds that he's lagging behind the information that he's reading. He's not able to connect it. And that's exactly the crux of the problem. You haven't read the stimulus, guys. You haven't identified the conclusion very clearly in your mind. And that is why when you go to the answer choice, you're confused between two choices. So Alexandre was saying the same thing. Bert was saying the same thing, you are stuck at the answer choice not because you're having a problem with the answer choice. The problem is you did not understand the stimulus. You don't have clarity about the conclusion. You don't know what you're supposed to do. So if you do not have a crystal clear understanding of the stimulus, why is it that? Why are we not able to understand the stimulus properly? Okay. So I'll tell you why. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to ask you guys if I am right about whatever I'm going to say on this slide. Pay attention. I'll ask you, do you agree with me or do you not agree with me? And at that time, I want you to answer. So tell me if you agree with me, okay? How many times has it happened with you that while you're solving a CR question, okay, you are in a hurry to finish it fast. You can kind of hear the clock ticking in your brain. And what you do is you just gloss over the passages. You just read your sentences in one smooth flow. Okay, you gloss over the passage. What happens at that time is you understand some parts. You don't have a clear understanding about some parts. You're confused. But at this point, you just tell yourself, okay, I will get back to the passage for clarity on this issue later. Let me now read this passage, finish it, and go to the answer choice elimination stage. Okay, you say that to yourself, and then you move to the answer choice elimination. You're already stressed under the time bias. And what happens is you land up picking the wrong choice. You narrow down your answer choices to 2, but because you did not have a clear understanding about your passage, about some parts of the passage, you don't know how to eliminate the incorrect choice. Okay, so what happens because of this? What are the fallouts of not properly analyzing the stimulus? What you do is you're not able to correctly and precisely identify the conclusion sometimes, and therefore you're not able to understand the scope of the conclusion. You are not able to identify what answer choice is out of scope and what answer choice is within the scope. And because of all this, the final result of incomplete understanding of the stimulus is you go back and forth between the stimulus and the answer choice. You keep doing this. You waste time. You choose out of scope answers. Out of the 2 close answer choices, you choose the wrong one. You mark an incorrect answer choice, sometimes which is preceding the correct one. All this confusion leads to low confidence, and I'm sure this has happened with you when you have solved one question, let's say a CR question. It didn't go very well. You answered something, but you were not confident. And that lack of confidence you carried it over with you to the other questions, and it hurt your other question performance as well. So tell me, guys, all of this, okay, how many of y'all would agree with this? Let me ask you. Let me reset the poll. How many of y'all agree with me that this happens, if not always, a lot of times. If not always, it definitely happens a lot of times. It does, right? And the funny part is, it's actually not going to be difficult to correct this. You don't need any rocket science. Okay. So Sudhanshu has become aware of this happening, and he has learned how to get rid of the situation. Very good. Very good. So Fahad totally agrees. Anshuman agrees. And so does Ramakrishna. So today we're going to see how a very simple step can help you sort all your problems, guys. And when I finish talking to you about this step, you will say, I thought already knew this. Well, you did know it, but do you do it? Is the question. Do you do it? I know everybody knows what is a premise. I'm sure everybody knows what is a conclusion. But when you are reading the stimulus, do you actively tell yourself this is a premise? Do you actively connect the meaning of two premises and draw in any inference? Do you actively do that? Or do you do it sometimes and you don't do it sometimes? So those are the things, okay? So as I was saying, the main reason why you're faltering at the answer choice, you believe that you're making a mistake with the answer choice. That's what you believe, but that's not the problem. As I was telling earlier to Frederico, Bert, and some of you others, that's not the place where you made the mistake. The mistake was made when you were reading the passage without understanding it. Okay, you moved ahead without a proper understanding. So therefore, how can you expect to come up with the right answer? So here's what you're going to do today. Okay, not in the exact order, but throughout the session today, I'm going to discuss and demonstrate how to read the stimulus correctly, guys. In each of the questions that I'm going to discuss today, I'm going to read a stimulus in a particular way, and I want you to concentrate on that. People usually concentrate only on getting rid of the answer choices. Don't just look at that. You will be able to get rid of the answer choice easily if you have read the stimulus correctly. Okay. So we're going to talk about how to read the stimulus correctly, how to identify the conclusion, how to identify the logical gaps that are there in the stimulus while reading the stimulus correctly. We will also talk about how to set the scope of the argument so that you're able to eliminate out of scope choices properly. Okay. So we're going to do all of these throughout the session today. So please bear with me. The point is not to just solve CR questions. The point is to learn from each of the questions that we solve today. So here goes how to analyze the stimulus very shortly and very briefly, which I'm going to demonstrate also. You need to identify the various components correctly. For example, you need to understand what role each of the sentences are playing. Okay, a lot like you do in the boldface questions. And that means you need to understand the role played by each component. Is it supporting something? Is it negating that thing? Is it trying to guard against a weakener? Is it trying to break the conclusion? Is it trying to go with the conclusion? What is the conclusion? All of these things you need to analyze. Okay. So you already know, these are some of the possible structures of this should be intermediate conclusion. Sorry, guys. Okay, so these are some possible structures of an argument, but these are not the only structures. Now, in each of these, you can see conclusion is written at the end. Okay, can you see this? That doesn't mean that the conclusion will always be the last sentence, guys. That's the mistake that we make. Okay, conclusion can be anywhere. It's the main point that the author wants to convey. So just keep that in mind. Now, here is a short paragraph. It's a very easy paragraph. I have deliberately chosen a very easy paragraph, okay, to show you how to read a stimulus properly. So what I want you guys to do is point out the premise, counter premise, intermediate conclusion, and conclusion wherever applicable. It is not necessary that there will be a counter premise or there will be an intermediate conclusion, but I want you guys to do this. I'll give you 1 minute to do this. Okay. And then I want you to post your answers. I haven't. Okay. I want you to post your answers in the chat box after you have analyzed this. Okay. So go ahead. In your chat boxes, you can just write, let's say, for example, if you think the first statement is a premise, just write P, then a comma. For the second statement, if you think that is also a premise, write another P, and so on and so forth. Okay. If you want, you can divide the same sentence into different parts also. I mean, the same sentence may contain a premise and a conclusion as well. So feel free to do that. Okay, I've begun to get some answers. So let me quickly read out some of the answers here, guys. I'll just read some of them because I won't be able to read all of them, but you get the point, right? So Kapil believes the first one is a premise. Second statement is an intermediate conclusion. Third is a conclusion. Amit says P, counter premise, conclusion. Bert says premise, intermediate conclusion, conclusion. Amit says premise, C and C. So Amit, you're saying there are two conclusions. We cannot. So C stands for conclusion or main conclusion, and IC stands for intermediate conclusion. So we can't have two conclusions. And Frederico believes the first one is a premise. And I think, Frederico, did you mean the second one is a counter premise? I think you meant that. And the last one is a conclusion. Mansi has given us 4 divisions. Interesting. So Mansi believes the first 3 segments are premises and the last one is a conclusion. All right. So a lot of you now, very few of you have mentioned a counter premise. So Alexandre has done that, and I can see Ele has done that, and so has Govindam and Sudhanshu. All right, that's interesting. Priyamvada, yes, Sonal, okay, you have divided the second sentence into 2 parts. Good girl. All right, Himani has mentioned Shubham. So I can see a lot of you have understood the various segments and a lot of you haven't. Okay, Frederico, thank you. So now pay very close attention to how I am going through this, okay? Perhaps you did it the right way. Perhaps you did it to a certain extent you were correct. Perhaps you were completely correct. And perhaps you went wrong at some places. So again, as I said, this is a simple paragraph, but the same thing you've got to apply in even most difficult situations. Okay, so thank you, Anish. There, first one, Anish says the premise, counter premise, intermediate conclusion, and conclusion. So this is how I want you guys to read any stimulus. Okay, so let's read. The new technologies. Okay, so I quickly, very quickly in my mind, I say, okay, we are going to talk about new technologies. Okay, for the manufacture of paper. So new technologies, new ways, new techniques for manufacture of paper require. So these technologies require significantly less fuel and water. Now, the word significantly is very important, guys. On critical reasoning, it's really very important. What it implies is a noticeable, sizable amount. It may not always mean large. It depends on the question itself, but it definitely means something that is going to make a difference. So what we have in this first sentence is a fact. It's a premise. The author is providing this for some reason. We don't know so far what is that reason. The author is telling us that there are some new technologies, and these technologies, they require a lot less fuel and water than was previously required by some old technology. So we can infer here that earlier there was some old technology, and that old technology must have been using a lot of fuel and water. All right, so the first sentence is a premise. Okay, let's read the second sentence. On the other hand, now on the other hand is clearly, again, if you do our course, you will learn that this is most commonly a premise marker. So we know right away that what is going to come up is a premise. All right. On the other hand, the new technologies. Which new technologies? So I'm going to relate back the new technologies mentioned in the previous sentence. See, this is a simple paragraph. So you might think, oh, why is she doing this? But I'm doing this to show how you should do even in a difficult passage. Okay. So on the other hand, a contrast here, the new technologies require a lot of labor. So if I just stop at this segment here, this is definitely a premise, right? I stop here, and we teach you to stop at this junction in the SC course, and is a connector. And we ask our students to stop at connectors before they proceed. So this part is clearly going against the first part, right? On the other hand, the new technologies require a lot of labor. So at this point, I don't know if it is a counter premise or it is a premise, but I definitely know it should be at least a premise. Depending on the conclusion, I'll get to know whether this is a counter premise or this is a premise. All right. So right now I know that it is a piece of information. It's a fact. Therefore, it is a premise. But this premise is definitely in the opposite direction of the previous one. And this refers to clearly this segment, because the new technologies require a lot of labor. So see how I'm relating back to draw my inferences and meanings. Therefore is a conclusion marker. Okay. And therefore, so this requirement of a lot of labor could offset, that means could kind of eliminate the whatever benefit there was, offset the reduction in fuel and water cost. Okay, so in the first sentence we were told that some fuel and water would be required, significantly less fuel and water would be required. But in the second sentence we are being told that since a lot of labor will be required, therefore whatever reduction there was in the cost by saving fuel and water would be kind of compensated or taken care of by the labor cost. So the second piece is clearly a counter premise. Okay, on the other hand, at least it is a counter to the first one. And here we can see, because of the word therefore, it's definitely an intermediate conclusion. Now I'm going to call it an intermediate conclusion because right now I haven't reached the end of the paragraph. It could very well be that this is the conclusion. All right, but since it is, I haven't finished reading the whole thing, I'm kind of just putting this off as the intermediate conclusion. So first one is a premise. So far I'm thinking second one is a counter premise because it is going against the first premise. And the third segment, which is a part of the second statement, is definitely a conclusion. But because it is right now halfway through the paragraph, I would so far for the time being call it the intermediate conclusion. Okay, if you have any questions, guys, just hold on for a moment. Let me finish this. All right, so see how I'm relating back at every junction. So far I know that the author here is talking about new technologies that save on fuel and water but take up a lot of cost on labor, and therefore the net benefit is not very clear. However, so the moment I have this however, I know a contrast is going to come up. Now however could be a premise trigger, it could also be a conclusion trigger, depends. So I'm not going to form any opinion right away. Since is definitely a premise trigger. Okay, it gives me a heads up that a premise is about to come up. Labor is cheap. So this is a premise, this is a fact. Labor is cheap compared to the costs of water and fuel. So, okay, water and fuel cost more than labor. So this is a premise. So because this is a because of this premise, this is the conclusion. The overall costs of paper manufacture will likely reduce significantly. All right. So since is giving me another premise, and since it is a reason behind the conclusion, the overall costs of paper manufacture will likely reduce significantly, it is a premise. And now we know that this was definitely a counter premise. All right. So what we have is therefore a premise. Then the next one is a counter premise, because you're saying requires a lot of labor. Well, that will not really agree with overall cost reduction, right? And then after that, we have an intermediate conclusion in the same segment. So these two are the same segment, but can be divided into two parts. And then we again have a premise. Sorry, guys. Then we again have a premise because the last sentence can be divided into a premise first. So this portion here is a premise, this whole thing. And the last one is definitely the main conclusion, because the overall point that the author is trying to make is overall the new technologies will reduce the cost significantly. All right. So there were 5 different segments and very few of you were able to get that. Okay. So premise 1, and now if you want to do a further understanding, so premise 1 and premise 3, if you see, they are supporting the main conclusion. On the other hand, if you look at this premise, what I have called premise 2 here, that is countering the main conclusion. Similarly, premise 2 supports the intermediate conclusion. So this is the premise for the intermediate conclusion, but it is a counter premise for the main conclusion. All right. So guys, hi, thank you, Shivani. Shivani says, Very well explained. So Shivani, thank you so much. If you guys can do this kind of analysis for every CR stimulus that you read, if you can connect the two sentences and the third sentence and the fourth sentence in this manner, you will never fail in CR. I can guarantee, at least you will definitely be able to get 85 plus accuracy. Okay, so let me see. So I've got some questions here. Ellie is saying, what would be the difference from intermediate conclusion and main conclusion? So Ellie, intermediate conclusion, now understand this, in a stimulus, you can have many opinions, right? You can have the third party opinion, you can have the author's opinion. In fact, you can have four different author opinions. The author is giving you different opinions, okay? So the main conclusion of the paragraph is the main point. However, the intermediate conclusion is not the main point that the author is trying to take. So a conclusion, when you say a conclusion, it is any opinion that is being derived based on the premise. But the main conclusion will always be in the author's words, and it will be the main point that the author is trying to drive. Intermediate conclusion will never be the main point. It will be some smaller idea that is being concluded by either the author or any other third party. So Shreyash, this is something that you will need to practice, okay? And give yourself that time, that patience. If today somebody told you, okay, Shreyash, if you already know driving, that's fine. But suppose you don't know how to drive a car. And if today you had to learn how to drive a car, do you think in a matter of hours you will get the knack of how to handle the clutch and the brake and the accelerator all at the same time? That coordination comes with practice, and practice takes time. And during practice, you will be slow. Give yourself that time, okay? Take time to master. See, for Shreyash and everybody else, take time to learn the approach first. First, learn it, then take the time to practice and master the approach. Only after you master it, give a mock, and then only after you give a mock, you take the exam, okay? So, Nit says, when I solve mixed questions, the accuracy drops. Nit, the technique for any CR question should be the same. Reading the stimulus carefully, analyzing the question stem carefully, and drawing proper inferences from the answer choices. Then only the whole thing will happen. So Mansi, initially, when you're learning this methodology, I would recommend not to solve 700 questions, 700 plus level questions. When you're learning this technique, I would first recommend that for the first 2 days, only solve easy questions. Get the hang of this technique. Then the next 2 days, you spend time on solving medium difficulty level questions. That means you are now moving from one platform, one level to another. You've learned the basic skills. Now you're trying out those skills on a slightly more different level. And then you move to the 700 level. And all this while, don't use the timer. Once you have got the hang of the approach, then gradually start timing yourself. So initially you will take 3 minutes, then you will take 2.5 minutes, then you will take 2 minutes, like this. Okay, so thank you, Ellie, for pointing that out, that what I felt that intermediate conclusion is just a premise. Absolutely, Ellie. All right, so wonderful, guys. Now, so this is the way you're going to read the premise today, guys. Try it out, okay? I'll give you more time for solving the question. So once you read the premise in this manner, you will know, the moment you move to your answer choice elimination stage, you will know what is working with the premise, what is not working with the premise, okay? So we're going to try that out today. Here's an official question, and I want you to give it a shot, okay? And today what we're going to do is, we're not going to pre-think for this. We're just going to go to the answer choice elimination after the analysis of the passage and see how we can eliminate the answer choice even without pre-thinking, but with the help of proper analysis of the stimulus and with the help of setting the scope of the argument. So guys, here are your time begins now. Go ahead. I'll give you some more time. I'll give you time, don't worry. So take your... All right, guys, I'm going to start my countdown. So if you haven't put in your polls, please do that. Please put in the answers in the poll. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let me see, the poll seems to have stabilized. Okay, now I can see it's still changing. So put in your answers, guys. Okay. All right, I hope. And in the meantime, I would love to ask some of you to point out what is the conclusion of this argument. In your own words, okay? I don't want you to quote from the passage. I want you to write down in your words, in your simple words, what is the conclusion of this paragraph, okay? All right, I'm going to end the poll, guys, so I can still see the polls moving. Make up your minds. Okay, here it is. I'm ending the poll. Okay, the polls are giving me an interesting result. So I've got 25% of the people who have marked A, 41% have marked B, 4% C, 9% D, and 18% have marked E as the correct answer choice. All right, so let me see. Frederico has already put in what he believes is the conclusion. He says the conclusion is paying extra for fair trade coffee can actually lower profits for coffee farmers. Frederico, that is not actually the conclusion. I want the conclusion in very clear words and exact, precise conclusion. Although what you're saying goes towards that, but it's not the actual conclusion. Ellis says high price for fair trade farmers lowers the average for farmer and it is harming. Ellie, you have given two statements. Which one is the main conclusion? Both or only one of them? Because, see, guys, forgive me for being so finicky and so particular, but it's very important that you are very particular about your conclusion. Otherwise, you're going to come up with the wrong answer. So Sudhanshu is saying fair trade practice hurts more farmers than helped it. Very good, Sudhanshu. That is the main conclusion. Alexandra says paying extra for fair trade coffee has side effects on non-fair trade coffee producers. Good attempt. Again, you have to be precise about what side effects. Himani says paying extra fair trade coffee, lowering the profit. See, guys, a lot of you have said that lowering the profit is the conclusion. Okay. Now, if you go back to the stimulus, so Bert is saying practice hurt more farmers in developing nations than it helps. So Bert, not more farmers, hurting more than helping. Hurting farmers more than helping farmers. Okay. So the issue is not about more farmers. If you see, hurt more farmers in developing nations. Sorry, Bert, you're right, actually. Hurting more farmers than helping them. Absolutely. So that was perfect. Anish says fair trade coffee detrimental to coffee farmers on the whole. Good. That's still better. Ellie says high price hurts farmers. Absolutely, Ellie. Now you're right. So Abhishek, we'll talk about A. We'll talk about all of it. Okay, don't worry. Abhishek is asking, can someone please explain why A is wrong? We will talk about that, Abhishek. In fact, you will get the answer once I finish reading the answer question. A is probably you marked A as the answer, okay, because you did not connect correctly to the question, and we'll talk about that. So thank you guys for that. And we have seen how different people can come up with different understanding of the stimulus. A lot of you thought that this last sentence is the conclusion. It isn't. It says this lowers prices. So we are being told about what happens in simple present tense. You are told about what happens and when it happens. But that's not the point that the author is trying to make. Okay, so let's go back to analyzing the stimulus. Here the author is the economist. The economist is saying something. The economist is saying paying extra for fair trade coffee. So let's call it FT coffee. So somebody is paying extra for this particular type of coffee. We don't know what coffee it is. Okay, we are given the information. Coffee labeled with the fair trade logo. So this is just an explanation of what is fair trade coffee. It has got a particular logo and therefore it is differentiated from other coffees. So paying extra, this is the subject. is intended to help poor farmers. Okay, so the purpose of paying extra for FT coffee is to help the poor farmers. Why? Because they receive a higher price for the fair trade coffee they grow. Okay, so poor farmers, if they are being paid extra for this fair trade coffee that they are growing, then it is going to help them. That's the idea. All right, so the first sentence is clearly a premise. This is a premise here. All right, it is telling us why one needs to pay extra for fair trade coffee. The purpose is to help poor farmers because they will receive a higher price for fair trade coffee. Good. This practice may, now notice the may is clearly an opinion, guys. It's an opinion, and whose opinion is it? Over here, it's obviously going to be the economist's opinion. So this practice may, however, so although it is intended to help the poor farmers, it may actually hurt more farmers in developing nations than it helps. And this is definitely a conclusion, but we don't know whether it's the main conclusion now. The economist is concluding that although the fair trade paying extra for the FT coffee is supposed to help them, it may actually land up hurting more farmers. And then in my mind, I'm thinking, what else? Probably the economist is going to explain how it hurts more farmers than it helps more farmers. Okay. By raising average prices for coffee. Okay. So now what is this it, guys? It is the practice of paying extra. It is this, sorry, one second. Let me just. So it is referring to this practice here. Okay. So by raising average price for coffee, so if everybody is going to pay higher for fair trade coffee, the average price for all coffee, fair trade coffee and non-fair trade coffee will go up. Okay. And therefore, by doing that, this practice encourages more coffee to be produced. So when people see that they are going to get a higher amount for the fair trade coffee, they start to grow more coffee altogether. Then consumers want to buy it. So the supply is higher than demand. Okay, you have supply which is more than demand. What is going to happen? Price is going to fall. Correct? See, I'm already thinking. So, and that's given next. This lowers prices for non-fair trade coffee. So clearly, people who are growing the fair trade coffee, they are getting high prices. But for the non-fair trade coffee person, because the demand has fallen way below, the prices go down. And therefore, the profit for non-fair trade coffee farmers goes down, even though profits for fair trade coffee farmers goes up. So I now know that all the others are all premises. This is a premise, and this is also a premise explaining how this practice is harming. This here is the only conclusion I have. So the conclusion very clearly is paying extra for fair trade coffee, okay, may hurt more farmers than it helps. And the rest of the passage tells you how. Okay, so the rest of the passage, lowers profits and all that, is basically information given to support that it is helping. Now see, understand the concept. It's saying it may hurt more farmers than it helps. So let's say if there are 100 farmers, if this practice is followed, majority, when I'm saying more farmers, I'm kind of thinking, okay, more are hurt than are helped. So I'm thinking maybe more than 50% are helped and less than 50%, more than 50% are hurt and less than 50% are helped. This is what is going on in my mind if I say more farmers are hurt. Okay, so more farmers are hurt by the policy than are helped. Now, what is going to be my scope of argument? Remember, we said that we are not going to pre-think. We're not pre-thinking. We're not trying to think what could be a possible answer right now. Okay, but we are trying to tell ourselves the correct answer choice should fall within what scope, what is the scope of argument within which I need to have a correct answer choice. So I'm going to tell myself literally, any new piece of information that shows paying extra for fair trade may hurt more farmers than it helps is going to be my correct answer. And I'm going to take every answer choice and compare it against this scope of argument. And I'm going to see whether it falls within that scope. If it doesn't fall within that scope, it's not the correct answer choice. We have taught in more detail about the scope of the argument in our course. We have shown how to derive the scope of the argument in a much more detailed manner. Okay, this really helps you even if you can't pre-think. And as I've said, we're not pre-thinking, we're straight away going to the answer choice elimination. So first answer choice. And Abhishek, I hope you're paying attention. Now, what does A say? Even before I eliminate the answer choice, okay, and I'm working more towards elimination than towards selection, okay, I need to understand what my question is asking. So, sorry, we need to identify the question stem and understand what it is telling us to evaluate the strength of economists' argument. So I know this is an evaluate question. That means I have to check the validity of the economist's argument. So what is the economist's argument? That this practice hurts more farmers than it helps. So I have to evaluate whether this is a strong argument or not, whether there is any truth in this argument or not. And for that, what do I need to know? Okay, and I'm not pre-thinking right now. So I'm going to answer choice A. And first I have to understand what answer choice A is really saying. Whether there is a way of alleviating. Alleviating means reducing. Whether there is a way of alleviating or reducing the impact of increased average price for coffee. So this question is basically asking me, is there a way we can reduce the bad effects of increased prices? Now, what are we supposed to evaluate? We are supposed to evaluate whether more farmers are hurt. This choice is asking us to evaluate, is there a way of reducing the impact of increased average price? We are not focusing on the central argument of the conclusion. Okay, this choice is focusing on the way to decrease the impact of paying extra. It accepts the impact. It does not help us to determine whether paying extra will hurt more farmers or not. And therefore, this is not the correct choice. It is out of scope. Remember what our scope was. If I go back, any new piece of information that shows paying extra for fair trade may hurt more farmers. This choice, if you see, is just saying, is there a way of reducing the bad effect? It is not telling us whether more farmers are going to be hurt or not. It's just telling us, okay, farmers will be hurt, but is there a way we can reduce that hurt? So Abhishek and all of you, I mean, a lot of you marked A as the correct answer, 25%. Can you see why A is incorrect, guys? I'm going to ask you the question. Have you understood why A is incorrect? You can answer me in the polls. Have you understood why A is incorrect? So yes, most of you later on, Marilise, Bert, Ramakrishna, you had got the conclusion clear. Yes, Abhishek? So Chaitanya, I'm going to discuss about the correct answer. All right, Abhishek has got that. Thank you so much, Abhishek. I didn't see your answer, so sorry for that. So Himani is asking a question. Himani, are you clear how I identified this conclusion? Himani is pointing out a very important aspect, guys. She's saying there were no conclusion markers. And that is where Himani, reading the stimulus properly will help you. We look out for an opinion sentence, okay? First thing, because a conclusion has to be somebody's opinion and the author's opinion particularly. Here the author is the economist. So if you read all the sentences, you will realize the opinion, the comment part is, the unsure part is only that line. The practice may hurt, okay? All the other sentences are facts, things that are taking place. Yes, Himani, is it, are you able to understand how we derived that conclusion? The conclusion is derived based on the last two lines. So I can see all of you all have understood why A is incorrect. Okay. And now we are going to move towards answer choice B. Again, we have not done any pre-thinking. We have just kept our eyes on the conclusion that more farmers may be hurt by the practice. Okay, now let's look at B. B is saying what proportion of coffee farmers, what proportion is like asking what percentage of coffee farmers in developing nations produce fair trade coffee. Now, when you read this sentence, on the surface, one thinks, what has the percentage of coffee farmers got to do anything with the price? Okay, but never eliminate a choice just because you don't know how to connect it. Try. Okay, this question is asking you what proportion of coffee farmers are producing fair trade coffee, and in the same breath it is asking you therefore what proportion of coffee farmers are producing non-fair trade coffee, because the conclusion is more farmers are hurt. Since we're talking about numbers of farmers, clearly I think we should pay attention to the proportion. So let's in an evaluate question, we should always think of two extremes. Okay, if the question is asking you what proportion, then one will be high proportion and the other extreme would be low proportion. So if low proportion, say if out of 100 total coffee farmers, okay, only 5 are fair trade coffee farmers, then 95% of the non-fair trade coffee farmers would be hurt. Therefore, our conclusion would be valid. If there are more non-fair trade coffee farmers, then more farmers will be hurt, right? Remember that this means more farmers will be hurt. 95 farmers will be hurt, 5 farmers will benefit. However, if out of 100 total coffee farmers, 95 are fair trade coffee farmers, then only 5 non-fair trade coffee farmers will get hurt. That means fewer farmers will get hurt. Fewer farmers will get hurt, and this is absolutely attacking, I mean, it is absolutely within the scope of my argument. My scope was which choice tells me more farmers will be hurt. This choice, the answer to this choice will tell me more farmers are hurt or few farmers are hurt. Okay, and therefore this is the correct answer choice. So Chaitanya, I hope you got your answer. Guys, all of you, are you clear? Let me just reset the poll. Are you clear with the explanation on B? Are you clear? Okay, great. And you would have come up with the same answer if you had gone through the pre-thinking, but the purpose is to show you pre-thinking does not have to happen every time, but understanding the stimulus has to happen all the time. Okay, so I hope you have understood B. In B, we are simply trying to get the answer to the question. You know, the conclusion was more farmers will be hurt, and B is telling us whether more farmers will be hurt or fewer farmers will be hurt. And clearly we can see that if more farmers are growing non-fair trade coffee, then fewer farmers will be hurt. If more farmers are growing fair trade coffee, then more farmers will benefit. If fewer farmers are growing fair trade coffee, then more farmers will be hurt. So let me see, I've got a query here. So Govindam says he had to read the stimulus twice. Govindam, if you want to avoid getting the if you want to avoid reading the stimulus 2 times and wasting time, make sure you practice the art of what we call involved and evolved reading. This is what we teach. You divide your sentences into small chunks and you read. So Shubham, choice B is within the scope. It's not partial. I mean, I think you're asking about choice B. Choice B is within the scope, right? Remember, the scope was, will more farmers be hurt? And this choice is talking about the percentage of farmers and telling us, yes, more will be hurt or less will be hurt. Okay, so let me move to the other answer choices. So this is the test of extremes, taking the answer to 2 extremes and checking whether it is the correct choice or not. And it helps. Whether many coffee farmers in developing nations also derive income from other kinds of farming. Other kinds of farming will tell us whether the farmer is able to make a livelihood. That was not our scope. This is not telling us whether more farmers will be hurt or not. Okay, so this is not the right answer at all. whether consumers should pay extra. Now, from the focus on fair trade farmers and non-fair trade farmers, we are moving to whether consumers should pay or not. Okay, whether the consumers should pay more for the fair trade coffee or they should not pay more is like saying, they making the right choice or are they not making the right choice. But this is not telling us whether more farmers are going to be hurt or not, and therefore this is also out of scope. Remember, our scope was more farmers will be hurt. This doesn't tell us whether more farmers are going to be hurt. This is just kind of accepting the fact that the farmers are going to be hurt, but what will the consumers do about it? 18% of you chose E, guys. The question is, how fair trade farmers in developing nations could be helped without lowering profits? See, again, this question is how to help them. This is not answering whether more farmers are hurt. This choice is also accepting that farmers are going to get hurt. So let us now think how we can help them. You should ask, will more farmers get hurt? That this choice doesn't do, and therefore it is the incorrect choice. So guys, I want you to realize, if you are not reading the stimulus in the right way, so no issues, Chaitanya. Okay. So stimulus, Chaitanya, I'll share the PDF of this session, and I'm sure you'll get the recording of this also. The trick is how you read the stimulus, and I'm going to do that in the upcoming questions also. So your question will already be answered, as in, how you read the answer choice, how you read the stimulus and how you set the scope of the conclusion. All right. So just keep a lookout for that. So let me bring up the next. So guys, just before we move to the next question, did you find this method helpful? Did you find this simple method helpful? Did you understand it? You're welcome, Chaitanya. No issues at all. We're all here to get some real, some in-depth understanding. So did this method help you guys? And it's a very simple method. You can use it for every question. All right. For those of you who find it very difficult to pre-think, for those of you who don't even know what is pre-thinking, this is a very easy process. Identify the conclusion clearly. Then tell yourself which answer choice gives me the answer to this conclusion, strengthens the conclusion, weakens the conclusion, evaluates the conclusion, and so on. Okay. So one such question, now this is, if you had done some pre-thinking, this is what we would have done. See, so we would have analyzed the stimulus that paying extra for fair trade coffee leads to what? Sorry, if we pay extra for fair trade coffee, it raises average coffee price. If average coffee price is raised, it encourages more than can be consumed coffee production. That extra coffee production lowers the non-fair trade coffee price, and it lowers profits for non-fair trade coffee farmers. So conclusion is, more farmers are hurt by the policy than are helped. How do we understand? What is the logical gap? We don't know how many farmers are actually. I mean, if I want to know more farmers are hurt, I need to know how many farmers are actually growing fair trade coffee. So that's the logical gap if you're looking to pre-think. So then you take the same example that we used while eliminating the answer choice using the scope of the argument. Okay. And we form the evaluate question. What is the percentage of farmers growing fair trade coffee or non-fair trade coffee? Okay. So even if you pre-think, you'll come to the same conclusion, but scope of argument is an easier way of doing it. Absolutely easy way of doing it. Okay. All you need is a very crystal clear understanding of the stimulus. So here's our very own in-house question. And I hope you really have fun with this. Understand the premise, connect the various sentences, guys. Make the connections correctly. You will get your answers clear. Absolutely, Govindam. So Shubham wants to see all the options slides. Shubham, I can do that. I think I'll share the PDF with all of you so that you can go through it once more. We want to do more questions and we are really short on time. I hope you really, really understand. I'm so sorry for that. So yes, Govindam, there is a logical gap there, and that's what I pointed out there. There are 3 more questions, Harsh, that we're going to solve. Okay. So here's the next question for you, all of you. Go ahead. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And I am going to stop, end the poll, guys. Here it goes. Okay, so very, I mean, there is and there is not a clear majority. So I've got 24% of the class marking A, 33% with B, 12% with C, 15% with D, and another 15% with E, which is like a very varied distribution. All right, guys, very quickly, what is the conclusion of this argument? What is the conclusion of this argument? We are supposed to weaken the argument. So what is that argument that we are supposed to weaken? What are we supposed to, what? So you can answer me in the chat boxes. I'll wait for a few seconds more. I think it takes some time. Okay, good. So Harsh, Chaitanya, Ellie, so far, absolutely correct. Government efforts to stop the poaching were successful. Perfect. Govindam, absolutely. So I think in this time, all of you got it. Anish says first line, absolutely. You know, interestingly, when you read this paragraph, you know, the first line is actually something that has already taken place, and one would think it's a fact. But it's only when you read the second half of the passage that you realize that the main point that the author was trying to make was in the first line. So great. Let me see. Apart from Harsh, Chaitanya, Ellie, Govindam, Anish, Shreyash, Mansi, Bijoy, Sudhanshu, Bert, sorry, Tanmay. Bert, that is not the correct conclusion. If poaching was not reduced, then price would not have increased. That is not the conclusion. Remember, if is a conditional. That conditional statement is given to prove, to support that poaching was a success. Tanmay says first statement, Himani says poaching was stopped. Absolutely. So poaching was curbed by government, was successful in curbing the poaching. See, Himani, the issue is not just that poaching was stopped. The issue is government was successful. Government made some efforts, and the government's efforts were successful in stopping poaching. And how do we know that? So thank you, Bert. All right. I hope all of you have got that clear. I'll quickly go through the analysis so that we can get on to the next question. And we will again set the scope of the argument. So the first line says government efforts to curb. Curb means stop. I keep simplifying this, you know, I mean, I've got into that habit, I think, from teaching. So government's efforts to stop the poaching of elephants. Poaching means hunting of elephants, mainly for their ivory tusks. So these elephants are mainly hunted for their ivory tusks. And the government tried to stop the hunting of animals for this ivory tusk. So government efforts was a success. Okay, this should be were. Okay, government efforts were a success. That's the conclusion so far. I mean, right now, I don't know it's a conclusion, but since we've already discussed it, if the efforts had not been successful, now look at the meaning of this sentence. If it had not been successful means efforts were successful. And that's what is said in the first sentence, isn't it? So this is actually supporting this part. If the efforts had not been successful, that means if hunting had not gone down, the price of domestically produced ivory goods, so ivory goods are goods that are made of ivory, the price would not have increased. Would not have increased actually means it increased, price increased. Okay, if you reverse this statement, it means, okay, price increased, the price of ivory goods increased. And there's another premise given here. The producers of ivory goods do not mind buying ivory from any and all available sources within the country. So the people, the producers, the makers of ivory products, they buy ivory from all sources. That means we can infer that they buy ivory sources also from the poachers. they are ready to buy even from the poachers. Okay, so here we are saying that since they are ready to buy from poachers and the price of these domestic ivory products increase, then it must mean that these people were not able to buy from poachers, and that must mean that the poachers were not poaching. That is how this argument has been built, really. So the first one is definitely the conclusion that the government was successful in stopping the poaching, and we are also told that the elements were mainly hunted for their ivory tusk. And then if you read the rest of the sentence, that's the reason behind believing that the efforts were successful. So that's the premise. If you look at it, the second long statement is actually a premise. The price of ivory goods produced increased significantly in 2005. Fact is, the producers buy even from poachers. Okay. Now, what will be the scope of the argument? We are going to look for any new piece of information. And Chaitanya, you can see how we are setting the scope. The conclusion is the government was successful in stopping the poaching. So any new piece of information that shows that the government was not successful, since this is a weekend question, any new piece of information that shows that the government was not successful in stopping the poaching, that will be the correct answer choice. Okay. Whichever answer choice shows that the government was not successful, because that is my conclusion. So the scope of the argument is to show that the government was not successful. And every answer choice I'm going to compare with this. Now here we are going to do a little bit of pre-thinking just to show that we can pre-think also. Since prices for domestic ivory goods increased, okay, the efforts to curb poaching were successful. This is the author's reasoning. The author's reasoning is very simple, that because the prices for the domestic ivory goods increased, the efforts to poaching must have been successful. And we have to weaken the idea that the efforts to curb poaching were successful. So the scope of the argument would be any new information that indicates that the efforts to curb poaching was not successful. Now here we can apply our learning about the demand, supply and prices, and this information we have seen in multiple CR questions, GMAT CR questions. This information, this outside information is applied. It's allowed. So we are going to use it. We know that demand, if it is high, but if the supply is fixed or low, the price is high. Similarly, we also know that if the demand is fixed, or if the demand is low and the supply is high, the price goes down. So here we are saying poaching of elephants for the ivory tusk will add to or maintain the supply of ivory, correct? Poaching continues, it will add to the supply or it will maintain the supply, because my makers, my producers, they are ready to buy from any and all sources, right? And this would keep the prices from rising, correct? Thus, the author is making the connection that the supply must have reduced significantly. This is what the author is kind of assuming, all right? The author is connecting that the supply must have reduced from the poachers, and that is why the price has gone up. So a weakener would be any statement that shows that the supply in the country of ivory from the poachers was reduced, but not because they stopped poaching. Now this is important. We can show that the supply from the poachers was reduced since the prices have gone up, but we have to show that it was not because of poaching. It was because of something else. All right. Okay. So we have to kind of find an alternate cause in that sense. Okay. So I hope this explanation is clear to all of you. And let's move to the answer choice elimination. A says, okay, so the weakener is any statement that shows, and this is also our scope of argument. Let's write down here. Any statement that shows that the supply in the country of ivory from poachers was reduced, but not because they stopped poaching. A says, poachers started getting a significantly better bargain abroad for their ivory in and around 2005. So this tells me that it is possible that the poachers were still poaching, but not selling in the country. They were selling abroad. This helps us kind of form a small niggling doubt. Okay, so if there was a better bargain abroad, it is quite possible that they were selling abroad and not selling in the country, and that is why the prices rose high. And this also proves that they were poaching. They did not stop poaching. So A is the correct answer. Okay. Is this clear, guys? I'm going to explain. So Alexander, this is a 750 plus level question. No, Harsh, that was a slight oversight on my part. We don't read the question stem first. We Shubham says, I did not understand. I did not know what poaching meant and related vaguely. Shubham, what you can do is see. These are some very commonly used terms, but suppose you don't know. So look to the stimulus to put the context in place. For example, here, let's say government tried to curb the poaching of elephants. Say you don't know the meaning of poaching, but it's given primarily for their tusk. So the ivory tusk, if people want the ivory tusk of elephants, we can't break it while they are alive, right? We have to hunt them, we have to capture them, and then we have to take the ivory tusks. So this poaching has to mean something related to hunting and catching hold of these elephants. Okay, so that is how you'll have to derive the meaning of a word from the context. So Harsh, I hope that is clear to you. Okay, we'll come to Himanshu. Why not option B? The question is not a 650 level, Govindam, because if you look at the polls, look at the varied answer choices on the polls. Clearly, you can see that a lot of people thought the answer was totally different from what it was. Okay, so for that is why we can see that this is not a very easy question, guys. Okay, so Himanshu, the answer is not B. That would have been, the demand can increase because of many reasons, Himanshu. We have to show that the demand increased or not. The supply definitely went down from the poachers, but the poachers were still poaching. So if you look at choice B, I'll move to choice B. It talks about demand, and immediately one makes the mistake of falling in that trap. All right. In fact, if you see, if you look at the polls, 33% of you marked B. And that's a very common enough trap to move towards the immediate assumption whenever we are talking about supply and price. Now look at B. It's saying the demand for ivory products shot up. That means this is explaining why the price went up. If the demand for a certain type of ivory item shot up, it increased the price. But does this tell you that the poachers are not poaching? This increase in price could have happened despite the supply remaining low, despite the government being successful. Okay, so increase in demand by itself does not prove that the supply of ivory from the poachers had increased or decreased, and that is why B is very ambiguous and therefore not the correct answer. Do you get that, guys? Do all of you get it? Why B is not the answer? B is simply tackling one part of the spectrum, that demand went up, that is why price went up. But it is not automatically telling us whether the poachers are not poaching. Yes, Govindam, it is not attacking the conclusion. It is just merely attacking one part of the premise, one part of the assumption. So I hope, Himanshu, that's clear absolutely now. Let's move to the other choices because we want to get on to the next question. In 2005, independent poachers, okay, joined forces to form bigger groups so that which could face. Could face does not mean they actually faced. Could is a capability, and it tells us that they formed bigger groups so that they could face increased government efforts or vigilance. This choice tells us that the poachers became more powerful, but this does not tell us whether the government was able to overcome their groups. I mean, this choice therefore is out of scope because we're not able to determine whether the poaching stopped or not. And the scope of our argument is supply from the poachers reduced, but not because they stopped poaching. So this is not telling us whether they stopped poaching or not. B, poachers identified a unique technique. Yes, they identified a unique technique, untraceable technique, but this simply means that the government, this simply tells us that they were better equipped. Whether they were still continuing to hunt or not, like choice C, it's not very clear. Okay. It does not actually tell us that they were successful in continuing to poach using those techniques. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. We don't know that at all. Okay. E. The producers of ivory products are always ready to pay exorbitant prices for raw ivory, since they know that they can recover their money. Does this tell us that the poaching stopped? No. This tells us that, this adds to the already given information that producers are willing to buy ivory from all sources. They're willing to buy. The increase in the price could have happened because these producers were buying ivory at high prices. And that is why, adding to their cost of production. So this choice does not indicate whether the producers were buying the ivory at high prices or not. This just tells us that they are ready to pay high prices. Okay. So this choice again does not tell us whether poachers were poaching or they were not poaching. And therefore it is not the correct choice. So all in all, guys, I hope you enjoyed this question. Are you all clear with this question, guys? Are you all clear with this question? If you have any queries, okay, it seems all of you are clear. So let me quickly bring up the next question. So I think by now all of you would have seen how important it is to read the stimulus carefully, each and every word, and to connect the dots and to set the scope of the argument so that you can eliminate the choices more easily. All right, so let me quickly now bring up the next question. Here it is, guys. Go ahead and your time starts now. Okay, Harsh, I'll accept that as your answer. So the previous question answer, Sanya, was A. The correct answer was A for the previous question, all right? The poachers were getting a better bargain abroad. They were selling their ivory abroad. And that is why we can prove that the government's efforts to stop poaching was not successful, all right? Okay, so let me quickly count 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Well, I can see the polls are still moving. Majority of you have got that right. So good work. See, for a 650, 700 level question, the majority, the correct answer is marked by a huge majority. For a difficult question, you will find that a lot of people mark different answer choices, which is what happened in the previous GMAT quiz question. Okay, so here I do have a clear majority, in fact, and I'm going to end the poll now. So 8% of you chose A, 56% of you chose B, 8% C, 4% D, and 24% did mark E. Let's quickly look at this question. Now, a question here was there were two parts to this question. One part was about the Goraville shopping district, and the other part was about the Colsons. Okay, so you have the Goraville shopping district, you have the Spendless discount department store, you have the Colson's non-discount department store. Lots of information happening there. So if you're not connecting the stimulus properly, you're going to go wrong. So we're going to see how to connect that stimulus properly so that we don't go wrong. Okay, sorry, Harsh. I'm so sorry. Okay, so let's quickly move on with the explanation. Now, a lot of students ask me, is it better to, and earlier Harsh was also asking that, should we read the question stem first or afterwards? I would say if such a small question stem is there, your eyes will anyways fall on it, then it's okay. But if it's a long question stem and sometimes the conclusion is given in the question stem, it's better to read it properly after reading the stimulus so that you don't waste time reading the question stem twice. So here we can clearly see we've got to find a weakener. All right, let's move. Although, so right away I know I'm looking for there is a contrast set to be brought up there. Although the discount stores, so particular kinds of stores, we have a discount stores in Goraville's central shopping district are expected to close within 5 years. So they are going to close. So discount stores, okay, sorry, discount stores will close. And why? Why? because as a result of competition from a spendless discount department store. So I'm thinking, okay, in my mind I'm picturizing there is probably a bigger department store which is offering discounts. So these poor smaller discount stores, they are slowly going to close down in the next 5 years because they cannot face competition from this discount department store, and the department store has just opened, which kind of explains why the expectation is supposed to take place within 5 years. All right, so such a long sentence, but see, I have brought it down to a very small thing. Discount stores will close. Why? Cannot compete with another bigger discount store. How many of y'all were able to quickly understand this, guys? How many of y'all were able to get this sentence and its meaning immediately? Can you tell me in the chat box? Okay, let me ask you on the poll itself. Yes, how many of y'all were able to get the meaning immediately? When I say immediately, it means in one reading. And how many of y'all, I mean, if you had to read that sentence 2-3 times, then you cannot answer a yes. Okay, so be honest to yourself. And this can happen to you in many other questions. If you're not reading properly, if you're not reading slowly, if you're not contextualizing, you will take a lot of time to understand it and you might even go wrong. So the trick, Shreyash, Abhishek, Shreyash had also asked me this question, is to break. Can you see how I was breaking it? Although at discount stores and expected to close within 5 years, and then again I stopped at competition from spendless, and then again I, so many times I stopped, but I did not reread the full sentence. So that's the trick. Simplify, break, read, simplify, break, read, simplify, and then relate back. All right, so let's move forward. So I have a scenario. There's a shopping district and there are small discount stores. A big discount store has just opened up. So these small discount stores are expected to close. Okay. So although this is going to happen, so I still don't have the contrast for this. So although all this is going to happen, those locations, which locations where these discount stores once stood, okay, those locations will not stay vacant for long. So this clearly is a conclusion being derived, but we don't know whether it's a main conclusion or not. The author is deriving this conclusion based on some information given before that. So although something is going to happen, something else will happen. Fine. In the 5 years since opening of Colson's, now I'm wondering, okay, there's another store here, Colson's, but this is a non-discount department store. So Colson is a non-discount store. And immediately my mind says, okay, Spendless was a discount store. So in 5 years since the opening of Colson's non-discount department store, a new store has opened at the location of every store. So now I'm thinking, why is the author talking about Colson's? Oh, the author is trying to say how when Colson came, a new store opened at every location of the store that closed. Okay, so it's trying to give us a parallel. See, Colson came and lots of stores closed because it could not compete with Colson. And wherever that store closed, another new store came up. The location did not stay vacant. So similarly, if the discount stores come in Gorville, if the discount stores close in Gorville, that location will also not stay vacant for long. That's the logic here. Okay. So clearly here the author's conclusion is those locations will not stay vacant for long. The locations of the discount stores that are expected to close down will not stay vacant for long. That's the conclusion. And on what basis is the conclusion author trying to say this? Okay, the author is saying this based on the example of Colson's. So here we have to prove, since it's a weakener, we have to prove that the locations of discount stores that are expected to close down might stay vacant for long. So our scope of the argument is clearly any new piece of information that shows that the vacant lots might remain vacant. Okay, so keep this in sight. All right. So remember, there are two parallels given to us. One about what happened with Colson's, to what is expected to happen at spendless. Okay, clear? So again, my query is, Govindam, have you understood the comparison now? Yes, Shubham, that's a future logic for spendless. Absolutely, Harsh. The gap is discount stores parallel to non-discount stores. Perfect. Very good thinking. See, if you read with enough deliberation, you will notice the gap automatically. That's how your brain will function. But you have to give your brain some help. You have to help your brain analyze information. If you read the information very fast, your brain is not able to look at the information long enough to process it. All right. Wonderful. So good work, Harsh, there, Govindam also. So Govindam, I am so happy you shared that with us. And one needs to be able to understand the comparison only by slow, one can understand the conclusion comparison as well by slowing down here. All right, so great. Let me go back. Now, let's do a little bit of pre-thinking here, because something did come to my mind, because I understood that, okay, Colson was a non-discount department store, and a store opened in its place. But will the same thing happen if a discount store is closing? Now, let's see. So what is the logical gap here? What kind of stores closed down because of Colson's? Do we know that? See here, Colson was a non-discount store, and they are saying a new store, but they're not telling us what type of store opened. And they're also not telling us what type of store closed. It's just giving us that it could not compete with Colson. Now, clearly, had it been a discount store, it would have probably been able to compete with a non-discount store. So what kind of stores probably closed down because of Colson's? It is unlikely that a discount store would have closed down. So probably a non-discount store closed. What kind of stores replaced the stores that closed down? Now, if a non-discount store is coming up, then the competition will be with a non-discount store, and the two will be, the smaller one will go out. So probably the kind of stores that opened wherever a store closed down because of Colson's was a discount store. So highly likely that discount stores came up because they would be able to sustain competition from Colson's. So the weakener would be the stores that came up in the locations vacated by stores unable to face Colson's competition were discount stores. If we are given this information, we will be able to weaken the conclusion that those locations will not stay vacant long. Then we can say that, look, in case of Colson's, whatever happened was because there were non-discount stores which were closing. So instead of non-discount stores, discount stores were opening. But in Goreville, we already have discount stores closing down because they cannot compete with another discount store. Do we expect a non-discount store to come up in place of the discount stores? No. Okay. So A says many. Now, a lot of you, some of you did mark A. The A is not the answer. See, A is saying many customers of Colson. So Colson's customers, they're expected to do less shopping there. That means Colson is going to lose customers. All right. So Colson is going to lose customers does not tell me whether the location will stay vacant for long. So this is out of scope. Examine the answer choice very clearly, guys. Many customers, okay. Of Colson, okay. Expected to shop less than they did before Spendless came down. So we are implying that the customers of Colson are going to shift to Spendless. Colson is non-discount, Spendless is discount, fine. But does that tell me that the locations where there were discount stores will be occupied again? We don't know. So A is out. B, increasingly the stores that have opened in the central shopping district since Colson's opened have been discount stores. So discount stores have come up to compete with Colson's. Forgive the handwriting, guys. It's very difficult to write on this moving surface. Okay. So discount stores have opened to compete with Colson. Will the same happen with another discount store? Will a non-discount store open? No. Will a discount store open? No, because the discount stores are anyways closing down. So B is the answer. It tells me that this is the reason why we should not expect any store to open in Goreville instead of those discount stores. Okay. So I hope, guys, that's clear. Let me ask you, are you all guys clear about the explanation for B? Are you clear with the explanation for B? Okay, great. Let's quickly move to the eliminating the others because hardly anybody marked that. At present, the central shopping district has as many stores operating in it as it ever had. Well, the number of stores doesn't matter because they're telling us that the central shopping district, anyways, in 5 years, the discount stores are all going to open. So currently, how many stores are there? We don't care. All right. Future can be anything. B says, over the course of next 5 years, it is expected that Goreville's population will grow at a faster rate. Now, if the population is going to grow at a faster rate, probably more stores will open. All right. So this actually could be a strengthener. If you expect the population to grow, maybe more stores will start coming up just because, or maybe instead of some stores, some restaurant will come up or whatever. All right. So many stores in the central shopping district sell types of merchandise that are not available at Spendless or Colson. One, many stores could be any number. Okay. It could be just one also. I mean, usually many is about 3, 4 at least, but it's a very small number. We don't know how many. One. Two, even if these stores sell something that is not available at Spendless or Colson, it does not tell us that the locations which are getting emptied because of the competition, that location will be filled up or not. So the passage tells us that all discount stores are going to close down. So no matter what these stores sell, they will close down irrespective of that. So this option does not tell us whether the vacated location will be occupied again, and therefore it is not the correct answer choice. All right, I have a question here. Let me see. Okay. All right. So I don't think anybody had any problem. And we'll bring up the last question of the session quickly so that you guys have some meat to chew on. Here comes the next question. I hope you're enjoying yourself, guys. Again, this is a GMAT quiz question. To be very honest, you should all be able to get the answer for this question by now after the rigorous stimulus analysis that we have done for the previous 3 questions and the kind of scope of argument we've been talking about. All of you should be able to get this right. Be careful. Don't hurry. Don't hurry over the stimulus, guys. And instead of trying to select the correct answer choice, try to eliminate. What you cannot eliminate, hold on to that. That will be the right answer. Go ahead. So Piyush, if the number of stores at present are maximum, as many does not mean it's the maximum that the area can contain, right? Piyush, if you look at that answer choice, it simply says that the number of stores are as many as they were previously. All right. So here we don't know whether that is the maximum number. It is possible that even previously there were some vacant lots. All right, guys, I'm going to start my countdown. So I can see you are enjoying yourself with this question based on the answer choices that I have so far. So, okay, guys, let me start my countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Once again, I can see that GMAT quiz question has really brought the house down. There is a lot of variation in the answer choice. That just goes to show the quality of the question. I guess I'm boasting a lot about myself just because I've made that question. But honestly, we have tried our best at GMAT quiz to make questions as close as possible to the kind of patterns that we have observed in the GMAT CR questions. All right, so let me stop the poll. Let me end the poll and yeah. Okay, 16% of you went with A, 16% of you went with B, 4% of you went with C, 33% of you went with D, and 29% of you went with E. Okay, so you can see how close it was. 16, 16, 16% A, 16% B, 4% C, 33% D, and 29% E. Let's see who has gone wrong. Please make sure that you wait to get the explanation on this one. This is one of those good questions where logical gaps really play a very important role. The field moles gather and store grains for consumption later. Now, let's say we don't know what are these field moles, but clearly they are some living creature who collect grains and they store grains for consumption later. So this is here a premise, it's a fact. This is what they do. All right. Okay. The moles slow down their pace of gathering grains. Okay, so now here we are being told about their speed of collecting grains. So these moles, they slow down their speed of gathering grains when the temperature shows signs of beginning to drop. So let's say the temperature is, I'm just going to use just a random number. If the temperature is 40 degrees, and when there are signs that the 40 degrees is going to drop, say it's becoming 39, 38 or 37 or something, then it has been noticed that these moles slow down. They slow down their pace. Okay. So this is again another piece of information. All right. They quicken their pace. All right. So they quicken their pace means again they speed up. So we've told when they slow down. Now they're telling us when they speed up. They speed up when temperatures begin to rise. Okay, so when from say 39, 38, 39, or even say, let's say it's 30, and there are signs that it's going to go to 31, 32, 33, what do? These moles quicken their pace. So this is another premise. So far we have different stages at which they increase and decrease their pace, and there is a correlation given between their pace and the temperature. But slow down again. Okay, so again they slow down when the temperature of the place where these moles thrive, that means where these moles live in abundance, reaches its peak, maximum temperature. So we are told about temperature shows signs of drop. We are told about temperatures begin to rise. We are told about temperature at the highest. Okay, so 3 different points we are told what happens. Moles slow down, then they quicken, then they again slow down. All right, these are all facts, all premises so far, no conclusion. These moles have begun to quicken their pace in the current cold temperature. Okay, so currently the temperature is cold. Currently, let's say it's 30 degrees, let's say, for example, whatever. I'm not going to say Fahrenheit or Celsius or whatever. So cold is relative. So let's say currently the temperature is 30 or something. No, let's take a lower temperature. It'll sound better, no? Okay. So let's say the current temperatures is 15 degrees or so. This is a fact. What is happening now? Moles have begun to speed up, and currently it's cold. Therefore, now we have a conclusion marker here very clearly given. The temperature must be about to begin to rise. Okay, so the author thinks since the moles are beginning to quicken their pace, so here it was given, right, that they begin to quicken their pace when the temperature begins to rise. So based on this premise, the author is saying, since the moles are now quickening the pace, the temperature must be about to begin to rise, clearly. So that's the conclusion. The temperature must be about to begin to rise. So therefore, since this was, so if you just go back, which of the following is an assumption on which the above argument depends? So our scope of the conclusion will be any new piece of information that must be true for indicating that the temperature is definitely about to increase. Okay, that means, in other words, we need a piece of information that could tell us that the temperature is definitely not going to decrease. If it is definitely not going to decrease, it is definitely going to increase, or we have to show some piece of information that tells us the temperature will neither remain the same nor it will decrease. It is definitely going to increase. All right. So with that scope of the argument, we move to the answer choice elimination. Okay. Now, I could, in the pre-thinking, and this is not just during the pre-thinking, this is like what I'm about to show you. I actually would do it while I was reading the premise. You know, the moment I read this part, this line, and then when I started reading here, I would realize some confusing information is being given here. Let me kind of quickly jot down the information. So temperature drops, then the moles slow down. Temperature rises, the mole quickens speed. Temperature reaches maximum, the mole slows again. So drop, rise, maximum. So temperature drop, that means cold. So cold to colder, from one temperature colder. Rising means from one temperature to hotter. Temperature reaches maximum means hottest, but we don't know what happens when the temperature reaches minimum. I mean, we don't know what happens when it goes from colder to coldest. That's the logical gap. So what do the moles do when the temperature becomes colder or coldest? If at that point of time they begin to quicken their pace, then the author cannot say that the temperature must be about to begin to rise. Okay, so the assumption that the author is making that moles do not speed up when temperature becomes colder or coldest. Remember, the temperature was currently cold. What if moles actually begin to speed up when from cold it becomes colder? In that case, this will not be possible, right? So the assumption should be that moles do not speed up when the temperature becomes coldest, reaches the minimum. All right. And with that understanding, we will move to the answer choice elimination. So if they did speed up when temperature became colder, then we cannot conclude that temperature is going to increase. So definitely they cannot speed up when temperatures go from cold to colder. All right. So guys, see how understanding and analyzing the stimulus really helps. It really helps, guys. Okay. And now I am quickly going to go through the answer choices. A, the moles can find grains more easily. Now let me just look at the polls, because 16% of you marked A, guys. It's not even relevant. Whether the moles find grains more easily, does it tell me, does it have to be true for my conclusion to be true? My conclusion is the temperature must be about to begin to rise. For that to be true, does it have to be true that moles can find grains more easily when the temperatures are low? The passage doesn't even talk why they quicken their pace and why they lower their pace. So clearly this is out of scope. The argument does not cover the ease of grain gathering. The pace is not reflective of ease, guys. Remember, the scope was the pace is reflective of temperatures. Okay, here we are saying the pace is reflective of ease. So this is out. B, the moles vary the pace of gathering grains with variations in temperature. This is already given information. Okay, this we know. We know from the passage. In order to conserve energy, this is the reason. Does it have to be that they vary their pace? Is it a necessary condition for this to be true? Okay, is this a necessary condition? No. It doesn't have to be. There could be multiple reasons. Okay, so why they change their pace with temperature is not my concern. It's just a distortion of given information, one of the traps, and therefore it's not the correct answer choice. Again, 16% of you marked A, 16% of you marked B. I hope you can see where your pre-thinking is or where your thinking is going wrong, guys. Very, very important to identify our errors. You know, then only at GMAT Wiz, that is where we help you. We tell you through a very detailed solution. We tell you exactly where you might be going wrong. All right. The moles are at their quickest when they sense the approaching winters. Now, already it's cold. We already know it's cold, guys. So approaching winters doesn't work here. Our concern is what happens when the temperatures drop further, not what happens when the temperature begins to drop. Begins to drop is what approaching winters implies, okay? And we already know when the temperature begins to drop, what they do, they slow down. Over here, they are quickening. So clearly, this choice is against what is given in the premise, guys. It's telling us that the moles are quickest. Their space is maximum when they are sensing the approaching winters. Passage is saying when the temperature begins to drop, they slow down. They are not the quickest. So C is definitely out. Again, 4% of you chose C. Small percentage, but I want you to see where you have gone wrong, guys. D, the places where these moles live experience only 2 seasons. Again, ask yourself, does it have to be true that there are only 2 seasons? We are talking about beginning to drop. There could be a transition season. We're talking about begin to rise. There could be a transition season. It doesn't have to be stark gray and white. So this choice again is not a must be true argument. Not a must be true condition. There could be other seasons as well, and our conclusion would still hold true. Now, interestingly, majority of you mark this, guys. 33% of you mark this. Yes, Harsh, it's a trap. See, winters is coldest. Yes, that's okay. But we already have currently cold temperatures, Shubham. So we can't just talk about winter and summer. We have to talk about it in a more graphical manner. Yes, Govindam, D is a general statement. It doesn't touch upon our scope of the argument. D, the moles do not quicken their pace. So moles have begun to quicken their pace in the current cold temperatures. Add that to this plus this. The moles do not quicken their pace when already cold temperatures drop even further. Therefore, the temperature must be about to rise. See the loop, guys. Can you see the loop? Can you see the loop, guys? 29% of you mark T. Well done. Good work, guys. Can you see the loop? So an assumption is, in that sense, a logical gap. In that sense, it's a missing premise. In that sense, it's very important to identify the exact data given in the stimulus. That brings us to the end of this session, guys. I hope you had a wonderful time. You can ask me any questions in general if you want to about your verbal preparation. In the meantime, I would love to have some feedback from you. So just give me a moment and you can ask me questions related to your prep, or you can contact us at these so you can register for a free trial on that link, or you can connect with us on support@gmatwiz.com, or you can connect at that WhatsApp number. Okay. So, Alexandra, all the question levels were, so the last question that you saw was again a 700 plus level. I wouldn't say it's exactly a 750 level, but definitely 700 plus level. Yes, Nawang, Marilise. So I'm just going to ask you guys to give feedback. Let me just prepare the poll, guys. Give me a second. It takes a while to get the poll up here. So just a moment, if you will bear with me. I want you guys to rate the session on a scale of 5. So, sorry, on a scale of 10. Please do that. Let me just put this up so that you can see it. And any other feedback that you believe will help us improve these kind of sessions. I'm just going to bring that poll up in a moment. And in the meanwhile, I'll be happy to answer your questions. There it is, guys. Yes, let me look at the questions. So you are most welcome. Let me just look at the answer. Okay. You're most welcome, Govindam, Alexandre, Abhishek, Mansi. Nawang, yes, we will provide you with a recording of today's session. All of you who have attended this webinar, your email IDs will be with us. In case you don't get it with a couple of days, you can just write to support@gmatviz and get it. Thank you, Marilise. Thank you, Fatha. You're most welcome as well. Govindam found this session awakening. Piyush found the session great. Thank you, Piyush. Himani, okay, let me answer Himani's question. Exam is on 23rd Feb, but my CR is weak. So Himani, if your only CR is weak, I would suggest you concentrate on reading the stimulus properly and the scope of the conclusion. But I would say if your SE is weak as well, then strengthen SE first, because the method of reading the SE sentences is very important. The way you drive an intended meaning correct. Okay. So, and please understand, each of these areas is equally important. Okay. So if you leave CR to the end, it will be too late. You need to have a structured strategy. You can connect with Piyush at that WhatsApp number to help you out there, Himani. Shubham, you're most welcome. OG is enough for accuracy. Yes. Shubham, always practice from the official sources, because at least you know that the argument is tried and tested. Aditya, thank you so much for that 20. That's brought a smile to my face, a big, big smile, even though you can't see it. You're most welcome, Bird. So starting point, Piyush, would be from SC, always sentence correction, because that is where you learn how to read one long sentence. Unless and until you understand the meaning of single sentence, how are you going to understand the meaning of 2 sentences or 3 sentences put together? You're welcome, Pooja. Thank you, Piyush. So Shubham, no time is left is like, when are we talking about? I mean, first of all, I don't want any of my students to ever reach that stage where you don't have any time left. If you don't have time left for properly solving last 3 or 4 questions, that's okay. Those questions don't have too much of weightage, and that's okay. But if you tell me that you're at the, let's say, 25th question and you just have 5 minutes or 6 minutes left, and there is actually nothing you can do. So that stage should not be reached, you know. So Alvin is asking, can you please advise how can I use this technique on RC? So very simple, Alvin. Imagine your RC is a long stimulus, okay? But you have that stimulus divided into paragraphs. So each paragraph is a small CR stimulus. You read that paragraph, derive the central idea of that paragraph. In fact, you can enroll for, you can register for the free trial and see how we teach you to read. We have this involved and evolved method of reading. And I'm sure we are going to come up. So we're coming up with a series of webinars, guys. I think that's going to start from the next weekend. And if you just visit the GMAT Wiz website, you will get the calendar for those webinars. Those are all going to be free webinars, guys. Okay. So we'll have a series of around, I think, 12 or more webinars, both on quant and verbal. Okay. CR, SC, CR, and RC included, and those will start from the 7th, I believe. So you can get a calendar for that from our website. Okay. CR takes lesser time to read, but RC takes more time. So Alvin, I would say that for a passage of about 250 to 350 words, give it at least 4.5 minutes, 4.5 minutes, because even if you take a little more time there, you will save time when you're answering the choices. You're welcome, Joy. I'm so glad all of you liked the session such a lot, guys. So it was wonderful having you as well. So those of you who are going to take the exam soon, I would say that definitely you can connect with Piyush at that WhatsApp number to guide you through the strategy and what to do at this juncture if you have very little time left and there are deadlines to be met. All right. But on the whole, I would say that if you want to improve any area in GMAT, you should start with SC. All of you, you're most welcome, Francis. All right. So I thank you for the wonderful comments and the beautiful ratings, guys. We will definitely try to do even better than we are trying right now. And as I said, you can visit our website to get the calendar of the upcoming free sessions on all the various areas of CR. It was great having you guys. If you have any more questions, I'm there for another couple of minutes. Okay. I don't see any more coming up. So as I said earlier also, two things I'll leave you with. You can get the recording of this session within a couple of days. Usually it is mailed, the link is mailed to you. Otherwise, you can write to support@gmatwiz to get that link. Two, you can connect with Piyush with your last minute queries or preparations or strategies. Oh, yes. Thank you, Pooja, for reminding me. I'll just quickly start sharing the PDF of this. Just give me a moment. Hold on a second, guys. I just need to upload the session PDF. Just give me a minute. I'm going to share it with you in a moment. I had it ready here. Okay. Yes. Let me just. So I have started sharing the PDF, the session PDF with you guys. You can see it at the link files on the left panel of your chat boxes, and you can download it from there. Can you guys see it? You're welcome, Pooja. I just kind of got carried away. I was supposed to share it earlier. Okay, great. All right, guys. So I think all of you have been able to download it. You're welcome, Check. You're welcome, Govindam. I don't see any more questions coming up. So I'm going to sign off in a couple of seconds. A very good night to those of you for whom it is a night, and a good day to those of you who are or is starting the day now. Have a great day. Thank you, guys.